Thanks for joining us today. This is going to be an interesting conversation. When the CoMotion team reached out to ask what we could do from a programming perspective to talk about timelines to net zero, there was one person that came to mind, and that was Lori. And I'll explain why in a minute. But just quickly, by way of background, I've spent the last 10 years focused on transportation, mostly from an electrification perspective, some autonomy, some new business models, micromobility and whatnot. But a partner and I have been investing in transportation electrification largely for the last 10 years. And one of the themes that keeps coming up again and again, whether you are talking to a charge point operator in the United States, or you're talking to the fleet that serves IKEA delivery in India, the question that keeps coming up again and again is timeline. When are we going to be forced to electrify? When are the electric options going to be cheap enough? When are we going to be able to operate the electric vehicles? Because a lot of people receive electric trucks and they realize that it's not just slow to charge, but it totally changes their operations. And that question keeps coming up again and again. Now that the vehicles are available, I think people are asking, okay, the vehicles are available. When are we going to have a net zero future, right? Where is this net zero future? And now that we're actually living in this world, we're starting to realize that there's a lot more that has to happen. And that's why I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring Lori and Optimus Technologies up to the stage, because they're working on something that's very focused on trying to get us near zero way faster than people that are working on net zero can even pretend to claim. So I guess with that, Lori, I would love for you to give a little bit of your background. I wanted to also make this a bit of a personal conversation, how you came to Optimus, and also tell us about what Optimus is doing.
Yeah, of course. I love that you said pretend to claim. It's going to get a little spicy up here. I like it. So hi, everyone. I'm Lori Dunn, CEO of Optimus. It is feedbacky, right? I can hear it. Came over to Optimus by way of an introduction through a climate Slack message, actually. That's what brought me over to our founder, Colin, and everything's been just peachy ever since. So my background is in social good, really invested in that work through college, through joining the Peace Corps, going to grad school, and navigating my way through the choice of do you do nonprofit, do you do government? What choice do you take? Figured out what works for my little rabbit brain is startups. I really like that pace. I like that function there. So joined startups and started learning quite a bit about revenue, landed in that Slack community, and got introduced to Colin, which is great. And Optimus Technologies was at a really, really fun stage when I joined. So company was founded back in 2010, working pretty heavily to build it out, commercialized by 2018. So 23, at the time I joined, about 23 customers, operational on the road. Over 250 assets decarbonizing on the road. By the time I joined, we recently closed a 17.8 million Series A. And now our biggest goal is how many trucks can we get decarbonized? A lot of you that I met yesterday or at the lunch earlier, they said, oh, what do you do? I said, I decarbonize big trucks. And that's it. That is what we do at the end of the day. There's a lot of different ways we can do that, but Optimus itself focuses on a simple bolt-on upgrade. It's about the size of a small carry-on that you all might have used if you traveled here today. And that little guy allows 100% biodiesel to flow through a standard diesel engine. Right now, you can handle up to about a 20% blend, although we are in Vancouver, so I'm sure many of you are really fearful of that blend, especially when it gets in that negative 40 degree. So we allow our system to allow 100% to flow through. And I just mentioned the weather. You might be a little afraid of that. Please don't be, because we actually allow any of the gelling issues you see even with a standard diesel engine. Those are completely removed, even in cold weather, by using this 100% biodiesel.
So we jumped straight into talking about the company's history, but let's spend another minute talking about biodiesel and what it is exactly it is that you enable fleets to do. So people can go from a normal diesel engine to using what people call B100, 100% biodiesel. How does this help them on their decarb journey? How does this help them achieve certain goals? What's the timeline for these upgrades?
Sure. So when you're talking about decarbonization, you have to decide if we're talking scope 1 or full cycle emissions. If we're talking scope 1 emissions, 100% biodiesel, B100 is 100% reduction. If you're including all the scopes and doing our full cycle, you're talking 75 to 85%, depending on the feedstock.
And when you look at fleets, like let's just look at British Columbia, right? When you look at fleets that are trying to meet net zero targets, what are you suggesting to them when they look at adopting electric vehicles? We had a number of conversations about hydrogen, a number of conversations about all these different technologies. Where does biodiesel fit there? Because frankly, I haven't heard biodiesel mentioned that much today.
Yeah, folks haven't, but someone did mention polyfuels, which I really loved. I loved when she said that. So when you're talking to a fleet, it is not one solution, right? One solution is what got us into this mess. It's not getting us out. There's a lot of options. So I'm never coming into a fleet saying, hey, I need 100% of your assets. What I am saying is something that's really important to never go down. Severe duty and heavy duty assets are a great place to start. So if I'm talking public company, like your trash trucks, your snow plows, your things that if my snow plow doesn't work and there's an emergency and then my ambulance can't get to Betty down the road and there's a problem, can't get her to the hospital, that's a big issue. That's not a whoopsie, the charger didn't work situation. This is truly a life or death, so we want to focus there. When you are talking to many public fleets, you can't quite afford some of the other options yet, and not just in the initial like in that initial deployment, but I'm actually thinking full cycle. Yeah, maybe you get funds that help you decrease that cost, but what happens in 3 or 6 years when that battery is up for maintenance and the warranty is there? And does that company exist anymore because of all the boom and bust that's happening right now? So there's that question. And then if they are still there, is that price the same and can people afford it? So it's things like that where we don't have reliability whatsoever. Think about B100 as an option on that. If you have ESG targets, whether you are a public fleet or a private fleet, think about the cost that it takes per carbon reduced right now. So if you can get 40% of your fleet decarbonized using biodiesel, because our cost is at a price point you can stomach, right? It's much lower there. If you get that, you're decarbonizing. You can prove that to your board, to your city councils, et cetera, and then you might get access to more funds in the future because you already proved you know how to assess the market and you make a really smart choice for your fleets. And then they'll say, when you say, hey, I really want to try this new thing, I want to try this new EV, they might actually trust you because they know you know how to assess the market. So think of part of your fleet that makes sense, that you need that operational reliability. Do that B100. Get that moving, and then give yourself that flexibility in 3, maybe 10 years when other people are ready to be more reliable, and then they trust the people that be, they trust you a little bit more, and then you have a little bit more money to spend to test out.
I did want to shift us to talking a bit more about timelines themselves. We've been referring to them in a very broad sense. But maybe for background, because I don't know how many people in the audience are aware, outside of their fleets or outside of whatever they're kind of narrowly focused on, what the timelines facing many fleets are. And maybe to fill in a little bit of detail here, fleet electrification, or rather, let me say, fleet decarbonization, net zero targets, the zero emissions mandates are happening today. They're happening now.
Is that a mandate from governments? Or from, I don't know, shareholders? Like, what are the mandates?
It is largely a mandate that's driven by government. I mean, you look at California or many other US states, depending on the type of fleet you have, whether it's drayage or long haul, the requirements are going to be different. Whether you're municipal or private, the requirements are going to be different. But starting as early as 2.5 years from now, some percentage of the vehicles that you're buying are going to have to be ZEV. They're going to have to be zero emissions. You don't have a choice. And what that means is if you're not going to find a solution, whether that be an electric vehicle and the charging depot that you're going to have to build, or you're going to find a biofuel vehicle, you're going to realize your business is going to start eroding away. And it's not that you're going to have to go change your existing vehicles. It's going to be that the replacement cycles are going to be whittled down because you can't buy vehicles you need to buy. The timelines are coming up now, starting in 2026, thanks to a lot of the stuff that CARB has done. And accelerating from there. Timelines are going to be a big reason, I think, that you're seeing growth in your customer base, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, it's massive. So if we're talking, let's just do a strict EV versus standard asset to base. So there are 7.3 million Class 8 tractor trailers on the road to date. OEM current new build capacity is 800,000 a year. Quick mental math, we've got 9 years to replace. So that is to assume a few key things. infrastructure is fully there for charging and like fast enough, right? That an EV actually has the power capacity of a standard vehicle, because right now you're seeing for heavy duty at least, you're seeing you probably need 2 assets to handle what one diesel can do. We need political social will, which we're already talking a bit about that, and there's a lot of climate warriors out there who are really fighting, so that's building. Let's talk full cycle of all the products, the cogs that it is to actually build the asset, that is at a cost that you can handle, but also it's at a carbon reduction that makes sense, right? Because right now it's newer, so they haven't shortened it like they do. Add these things in, and that's assuming right now that exists. It's going to take us 9 years to replace. So there's your timeline. Right? I look at the IPCC reports, I see everything out there. We don't want to hit 1.5 degrees by 2030. That's really close. And because we didn't move fast enough, that number actually went back to 2027. So we actually have about 3 years to reduce our carbon now. So if you wanted to do something to decarbonize, there are a couple options out there. You don't have as many as it seems out on the market where you see all these new companies popping up. Not in the 3-year window. You really don't. There's only a couple of us out there that have active assets on the road that can help that. In the future, yes, please keep investing, please keep thinking of going forward. But current assets, there is something that you can do and you should do. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to upgrade current assets is really a game changer, I think, for fleets that have heavy duty and, as you say, severe duty fleets. And maybe to make it a little bit more clear, because not everyone in the audience has actually been a fleet manager, let me explain from our perspective, because I'm coming from the EV side of the world, right? Not the biofuel side of the world. Let me give my perspective of why it has proven challenging for some people to adopt EVs into their fleets. Because everyone's saying EVs are great, there's no maintenance, the fuel's cheaper, like it should be obvious that you're adopting EVs. From a macro perspective, I feel like there's a lot of this assumed supremacy of electric vehicles. And when the rubber hits the road, there are a lot of challenges that fleets have to overcome. So to give you a few specific examples, if you are buying a few hundred F-150 Lightnings, right, or Silverado EVs, and you're putting them into your municipal fleet, you might not, in fact, I would even posit to say the majority of people that are putting in not just the 1 or 2 chargers for the Pilot, but the people that are actually putting in the 50, 60 chargers they're going to need to hit the 10% or 20% adoption schedules, you're immediately going to run into a grid upgrade problem. The grid's going to say, you're not going to get the energy, at least not for 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 years. And at that point, you're not just buying the batteries in the vehicles. What you're really doing is you're going to have to buy batteries for your stations, you're going to have to put solar in your stations, you're going to basically turn all of your parking lots, all of your fleet depots into mini power plants. And what that's really asking for is behavioral change from the fleets. And I think the most important thing to understand is that to go net zero through electric, which in my view, and feel free to argue with me on this, but in my view, that's ultimately the long run goal, and that is what's going to happen 30 years from now, 40 years from now. Fleets are going to be net zero through BEVs. But in order to do that, you're not just having to buy the vehicles. You have to build complicated charging depots, and to do that, you need a lot more ability to coordinate and orchestrate your activities. I mean, the last 10 years have been all about digitizing fleet operations through fleet management software. We now need charging management software. That's what we're focused on in Port Power. So I'm 100% with you when you say it's easier for somebody to just say, hey, I have a diesel vehicle, now it's biodiesel. I've gotten part of the way to net zero, right? In the long run, I do think, though, that that's only a building block towards a broader net zero goal. Tell me if you disagree.
No, I mean, there's a difference near and net zero. I do take a bit of umbrage with the idea of net zero because everyone's just talking about tailpipe emissions. So no one's actually really talking net zero yet. Everyone's near zero right now. Future, sure, if we want to dream to 2050 and plan, maybe that's the world. Maybe that is what it looks like. It's going to require a lot. Yeah, just a lot. It's going to require a lot to get there. And luckily, there's a lot of really smart people working on this work, really smart, really passionate people. So that is a future world. Right now, the shareholders are asking what we're doing today. They're asking what they can do, how they can access things today. So what worries me is when I walk outside and I look at that beautiful vista and I see the beautiful trees and I can actually see the skyline and I can see the beautiful water, I worry that that won't be there for this 2050 everyone's running towards right now because it's just so cool and so sexy. Don't get me wrong, I love cool and sexy, but I also really love trees and water, and I would like that to be there. So instead of everyone charging for this net zero, I'm more interested in what's the real solution in near zero and that conversation, because that's much more interesting. That messy middle fires my brain off a little more.
Do people, I mean, are customers agreeing with you? Like, can you tell us about any of the big kind of wins you've had recently? Because you just closed a really large Series A led by one of the biggest fleet operators in the world, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that was really fun. So largest customer for North America, let's talk right now, DC Public Works is a pretty massive customer. Every new refuse truck and snowplow that comes off the line has the Vector system installed. We're ready to go. The largest private fleet in North America now has us installed, and they chose, like I mentioned before, it's not every asset, but something that's really hard, something over 400 miles that's running really far, that's something that they're going to have us installed on.
That's something you can't really easily electrify anytime soon.
Not anytime soon, and that's that more interesting side for me, where I'm more interested in who's acting now as opposed to dreaming in 50 years. That is not to say in 10 years you won't see me make a lovely post on LinkedIn saying, I'm joining this company. Because maybe by then that's where it gets more of that messy middle that helps me get, excited about what's going on. But right now it's like, what are we doing today to make sure I can have trees and a skyline?
That's awesome. Maybe one kind of flyer question. I think that the energy transition is I don't think it's a highly politicized topic, especially in the United States. And I think the politics
and your lobby is awesome. It's really good.
Well, it's good, but pushing electric vehicles has seen a lot of resistance. I mean, for context, I was at the ACT Expo, and CARB's on stage, and somebody asks a question that's respectful, but points out, hey, these mandates, how can we do this? We can't just buy trucks. We have to build infrastructure. It takes time to do this. And the whole room erupted in people applauding. There's a political angle to all of this. How does biofuel fit into that? I mean, you're a tech company, albeit based in Pittsburgh, but you're a tech company, venture-backed.
Ouch, did you hear that? He said, albeit in Pittsburgh. Oh, man.
And you're selling to fleets of trucks, right? I mean, how would you say that, when you approach your customers, is there any kind of two worlds coming together that you're seeing?
Oh, God, yeah. Of course there's two worlds because it's the ultimate circular economy, right? We're taking farmers' products or your local restaurants used cooking oil, and like when we're talking feedstock, and we're bringing that into a refinery that's in a local area, right? Creating jobs there for people to create these biofuels, and I'm using 100% biodiesel. There's also the play for renewable diesel, for sustainable aviation fuels, other things that were spoken about earlier today. That's happening right there, and then the customers are 6 miles away. Talk about your scope 2 emissions right there, right? That is so close. You can't beat that from being mined in offshore drilling and the like, and then bringing that all the way back and then crossing the country to get to them. Like, we're really talking, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, you're interested in keeping things here, keeping jobs local. We're launching in Canada, and I'm able to use Canadian suppliers to launch that for Canadian fleets. It's a great story for everyone, and it's a great impact because that biogenic carbon, it's there. It was already in the environment. We're just repurposing that for another use. So politically, it's pretty good. And CARB, we have a CARB executive order allowing us to run. That's great. And then they have other things that come out that aren't necessarily on our side, as it were. So politically, biofuels are actually a beautiful option for folks because it's not this uproar that you see on EVs where there's a lot of opinions. People either get excited or they roll their eyes. That's what I see. You don't see that as much. You just see people saying, but does it really work? Because there were some issues with biodiesel back in like 2010s in that area, so some people are a little fearful, but once you understand the progress that the industry has made, and then you find something like the Optimus vector system, and you say, oh, this is how it works. This is how we make it blend, so fleets never have to shut down. They can keep operating in any weather, any condition, while we wait for EVs, for hydrogen options, for ammonia, for ethanol, for them to like get up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the magic of no behavioral change, that's something everyone in the EV world wishes they could guarantee to their customers. Well, you mentioned marine, you mentioned aviation. I'm imagining those are all future spaces for you and probably why you're excited about the trajectory of your company.
You bet.
Well, congratulations on the Series A and
Thank you.
all the best in your growth.
Yeah, thanks, Prescott. Thanks, everyone.